Hello and welcome to the table, Baldurs Gate and DND friends. Happy holidays, have a seat, grab your favorite drink, and settle in for a unique modded character build and subclass of the Warlock, the Dark Hunger Pact. This will be a winter and holiday themed build that I like to call the Winter Demon or Krampus build, with a fun thematic focus on role-playing the evil version of Santa, who's coming to take the souls of everyone on the naughty list. Yes, I know this is a joke character, but this is also a genuine modded class showcase as well. This episode will be going through all 12 levels of the Dark Hunger Pact. Credits to the mod author, Vinab, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, friend, for putting the time and effort in bringing the theme of this class and its features to life. Also, a couple of important information from the mod author themselves before you try this class out. This is a homebrew warlock patron loosely inspired by the far realm infested stars like Hadar. The pact focuses on killing living creatures and sacrificing the life force of those you have slain, as well as your own, to cast more spells. So yes, a very straightforward description here, focusing on being not just a caster, but incentivizing you to be that aggressive caster to kill off as many of your enemies as you can in order to continuously dish out more magic damage. So yes, it's a very aggressive playstyle, and also I do like the mechanic that is mentioned of draining some of your own health to dish out damage as a bit of a risk and reward factor too. Side note, I know this is getting ahead of myself too, but the fact that there's different kinds of boons and essentially you can choose from one of these four, it provides a lot of opportunities for separate modded class builds that we'll do in the future too. Now, for those who are new to the channel, one of my main focuses for videos is creating unique Baldur's Gate 3 characters, utilizing mods both for enhancement and roleplay, specifically giving you different ways of replayability. Now, if that's something you are really into, I would love to hear your personal favorite character builds in the comments below, and let's get an in-depth discussion going with characters you would specifically build this class around and what you would multi-class this with, or completely different character builds as well. As a side note, I also have videos of narrative-driven Total War Warhammer campaigns of both modded and non-modded factions to show and tell unique stories of each of the different leaders. If you love talking shop about character builds or epic story-driven war campaigns, consider hitting the like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications for more of those unique adventures. Now, for the new viewers too, who may have only stumbled upon this video, the way we will structure this character build is going through the starting level with specific choices in race and other beginning features for roleplay and thematic purposes, going through levels 2 through 12, and then wrapping up with specific gear and equipment to complement the build in terms of roleplay or improving stats or spells. Now, when it comes to the character builds, I do mainly stick with choices in the spells, abilities, and equipment that suit the characters thematically, or keeping in line with what the modded class is intended to be from the mod author. However, I do sometimes slip into the min-maxing and also strategic damage output, regardless of whichever camp you fall into, whether you are purely a role player or very much into the number crunching statistics wise. Just as long as you yourself are having fun with the character, the build, and playstyle, that's what matters in the end. And the reason I'm going through 12 levels only as a class alone is to really showcase everything there is to offer from the mod author, and this is my personal way of saying thank you to Vinab for taking the time and effort to put all of these features in 12 levels. And yes, as an added thank you, I will of course leave the link to the mod in the pinned comment below, along with a couple of other mods I use to pair well with it too. And yes, we will be saving separate videos for multi-classing this modded class together with other modded classes, or even with vanilla classes, to really see what kinds of synergies and combinations there can be. And yes, to keep this Krampus and holiday theme, we're going to keep our best to sticking with spells and abilities that are both ice-based and demonic and evil in nature too. Now, without further ado, let's get into the first level of this build. At starting level, you're going to choose Tiefling to fit that demonic devilish vibe of Krampus, but also we're going to specifically use a Tiefling subrace mod, which adds different types of Tieflings for the different subraces. And yes, these are lore-friendly subraces of Tieflings. They're in the 5th edition tabletop version of D&D, and to fit the cold winter harsh theme, we're going to go with Levistus. Now, quick overview of who Levistus is he is a Lord of the Nine Hells, plus also he was imprisoned within his own realm. I believe it was one of the deeper circles of hell, if I remember correctly, by Asmodeus himself. So he rules over that cold land, but he's also frozen on his throne. D&D enthusiasts, please let me know if I am missing other important lore and information, and I don't mind the criticism either, just because I love talking about the lore and history of D&D, and I'm a bit of a nerd about it too. But that aside, choosing the Levistus Tiefling will grant us cantrips of Ray of Frost, dealing 1 to 8 cold damage and reducing the target movement speed by 3 meters, adding a little bit of battlefield control at starting level. And also we get a melee attack here with Frigid Claws, 3 to 6 cold damage, concentrate the numbing energy in your blood into the clawed fingers and lash out at an enemy. You're going to want to use this if the enemy does somehow close the distance on you. Hopefully they won't though, with a Ray of Frost. But also by choosing the subclass of Dark Hunger, we're given a choice of cantrips here. Now, I'm also using an Eldritch Blast mod, which changes up the color and also the element of Eldritch Blast. Instead of using the regular Force Eldritch Blast, we will be using Cold Blast, which, as the name implies, deals 1 to 10 cold damage. And also to complement it, we'll be using Frostbite. Now, even though it only does 1 to 6 cold damage, and, well, the damage output clearly isn't as high as Cold Blast, it does have the added effect of posing disadvantage on the enemy's next attack roll, so you can switch in and out between those two, and also Ray of Frost, depending on what you want to go with pure damage output, adding disadvantage, or also slowing down their movement. As for the spells here, again, keeping with cold theme aesthetics, we'll use Chilling Tentacles, which is unique to the subclass in and of itself, dealing 2 to 12 cold damage. Summon Chilling Dark Tentacles to grasp a creature, dealing that cold damage and having their movement until the end of their next turn. It does only last for 1 turn though, but it is very strong at starting level. Also, something useful at starting level 2 is Armor of Agathis, to gain those 5 temporary hit points and dealing 5 cold damage to any creature that hits you with a melee attack. This is a good reflect damage spell, plus also the 5 temporary hit points will give you a little bit of breathing room and not really tanking potential, but a little bit of a safe way too. We also gain boons of the Elder Evils. We can choose one of these 4, but personally for me, to fit the theme and roleplay, I like Devotion to Madness. Call upon an unfathomable power contained within the madness you worship and imbue it into another, turning them into a hollow shell who obeys the will of your dark patron and who in turn allows you to command it. When a creature is turned into a follower, they regain 20% of their HP. Now, I decided to choose this because it kind of fits the theme of Krampus stealing kids, people in general, and turning them into mindless slaves, making very grotesque toys in his shop. While you have a follower, your max hit points are reduced by 20%, adding to the roleplay of you giving 20% of your health to heal your undead puppet to 20% health. You can only have 1 follower at any given time, and you can only convert creatures of an equal or lower level than you into a follower. So there's a little bit of limitation here, but also it's a good risk and reward thing too, of whether you want to summon and utilize a follower of lower level, or trying your best to get a potentially higher enemy to become your thrall. As for the background, I decided to go with Acolyte. You could go with Criminal or Urchin as well, depending on what you want to go with, but also you could justify Criminal as well. Krampus is pretty much hunted by the SCP and other organizations too. It gives us skills of deception and stealth. As for your ability point allocation, this may seem a little odd in terms of stacking them in different areas and taking them away, but we're not going to be using a lot of strength or really much intelligence, so we'll be putting those in the negative. Wisdom will keep at its base 10, no negatives, no plus, but we're going to dump most of them into charisma since that is our casting modifier. Plus also some of the features do rely on our charisma modifier. And as for the rest of the points, we're going to put them into constitution and dexterity. Yes, I know they're in odd numbers, but as we gain different feats and other abilities and features too, we'll be putting some points into them so then we can get good even numbers, and hopefully even eventually maxing out our charisma too. As for skill proficiencies, we'll be putting a lot of points into stealth with a +4, arcana at an okay +1, deception at a strong +5, and intimidation at a very strong +5. All of these being very thematic for Krampus, especially with the stealth and also intimidation part too. The intimidation being that, well, you are scary Santa, and also stealth being that you're not going to be seen or hunted down so easily too. Come to think of it, actually, the SCP does have a pretty hard time at tracking down Krampus. We also gain the Undying Hunger passive feature at this level too. You are one of the many servants of the unfathomable beings whose power you borrow from. For them, you offer the vitality of those you slay as sustenance to their unending hunger. When you kill a creature, cause their body to explode, dealing necrotic damage equal to your charisma modifier in a 3-meter radius around the corpse, and gain stacks of dark nourishment equal to the slain creature's level. Once per long rest, you can consume some of the vital energy you have stolen to cast insatiable magic and restore one of your spell slots. All stacks of dark nourishment are offered to your patron upon taking a long rest. At second level, the spell choice I would choose here to fit the theme of Krampus is Cause Fear. Everyone is pretty scared of Krampus, or essentially a naked demon crawling down their chimney and taking them away in the night, awakening the sense of mortality in a creature and frightening it. For 10 turns, which is a pretty long time in combat, frightened creatures can't move, and also have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. As for the Eldritch Invocations, we're going to double down on our Eldritch Blast. When you cast Eldritch Blast, add your Charisma modifier to the damage it deals unless it's negative, and also Repelling Blast. When you hit a creature with Eldritch Blast, push the creature up to 4.5 meters away from you. This will pair pretty well with our cold spells that decrease movement speed, as it will keep enemies at bay and give us advantage over melee enemies and barbarians trying to close the distance on us. At level 3, the spell choice I would choose here is Devouring Dark. Create a pit of darkness around a target creature. All creatures within 5 meters of that creature must succeed a Constitution saving throw or be devoured for up to 3 turns. If creatures succeed their saving throw, movement speed is still reduced by 3 meters for 3 turns. For the Pact boon here, I would choose Pact of the Chain, and this essentially gives us a minion to help us in battle. Krampus himself definitely uses minions and evil elves, plus also, well, don't want to get too deep into the lore here, imprisoned children or captured slave children to make more very unhinged toys in his workshop. but you can choose whichever one you want here. I like Find Familiar to give us a creature or some very feral animal to help us out in battle. For the race specific spell here, as a Levistus Tiefling, we gain Legacy of Stygia, Armor of Agathis, 10 temporary hit points, and deal 10 cold damage to any creature that hits you with a melee attack. This is essentially an upgraded version of our previous Armor of Agathis spell, which we will replace here as it's a little bit redundant, and I would personally choose Hold Person. Essentially, this is our way of role-playing Krampus capturing and keeping enemies in place for a whole 10 turns, and also attacks from within 3 meters, always critical hits. At level 4, choose whichever cantrip you want here, doesn't really matter too much, but also, to try to keep with the theme, I decided to go with Toll of the Dead, dealing 1 to 8 necrotic damage, or higher amounts of damage, potentially of 1 to 12 necrotic damage if creatures are injured. You could roleplay and justify this as a very evil Carol of the Bells, if you will, and essentially it's kind of like Krampus is coming to town. For the spell choice here, I like choosing Ray of Enfeeblement, weaken a foe, deal half damage with weapon attacks using strength, and this lasts for 10 turns. This is kind of like your anti-barbarian, anti-fighter sort of spell too. And essentially, it's kind of like causing more dread and essentially weakening foes so that you can eventually capture them. As for the feat, I would personally choose Ability Improvement, putting 1 point into Constitution and also 1 point into Charisma, each getting up to 18 and 16 respectively. Plus also, this puts them at even numbers, so we have Charisma at a very strong +4 and Constitution at a respectable +3. So we have a higher health and also more casting potential and damage output. At level 5, we gain class features of our familiar gaining an extra attack. Spell choice here, I would personally choose Breath of Hadar, unleash a wave of cold and death in a cone. All creatures up to 9 meters away must succeed a dexterity saving throw or take 2 to 16 necrotic damage. On top of that, 3 to 24 cold damage. The spell siphons life energy from creatures hit, healing you for half of the necrotic damage you deal and preventing them from regaining hit points. So this is kind of like not really a get out of jail free card, but it's definitely something that can complement your other features as Krampus too, since like I mentioned before, you'll have the option of sacrificing some of your health points to regain spell slots, and then thus starting a vicious cycle of the Breath of Hadar, regaining your health points. Well, that's giving you more essential time to potentially use it and to survive in battle, or sacrifice more health points to unleash more Breaths of Hadar or other spell slots. So it's a very it's a vicious cycle, but also it's a pretty toxic playstyle too. As for race specific spells, we gain the Darkness Evocation spell. Create a dark shroud that heavily obscures or blinds creatures within. Creatures can't make ranged attacks in or out of it. And for the Eldritch Invocation, to keep it in line with Krampus and essentially being a bad omen, we'll have Sign of Ill Omen with Bestow Curse. Curse a creature with your touch. Curse either bestows disadvantage on checks and saving throws or attacks, and also lets you deal additional damage to the target or robs it of its actions. At level 6, we gain the subclass feature of Rite of Elder Magics. Once per short rest, you can cast a spell without expending a Warlock spell slot, instead sacrificing some of your max HP. Your max HP points are reduced only by 5% per level of the spell you cast with this feature, and your max hit points are restored after a long rest. I personally think this is definitely worth it for that spell slot. Only a small amount of health is reduced. And also, speaking of spells, to keep in mind and in line with Krampus, I like enemies abound, reach into a creature's mind, causing it to lose the ability to distinguish friend from foe. Oftentimes, victims of Krampus are hallucinating or essentially see Krampus everywhere they go. Enemies abound does last for 10 turns. On a save, target repeats saving throw each time it takes damage. And essentially, this is kind of our way of driving them stir crazy. At level 7, the spell choice I would choose here would be Akamar's Grasp. Create a powerful gravitational force to draw a creature towards you. If the target fails a strength saving throw, they take 4 to 48 force damage and are pulled 9 meters towards you. The target creature becomes tied to you through an invisible force, reducing its movement speed by 3 meters. At the end of its turns, it must make a strength saving throw until it succeeds or until 10 turns have passed. If it fails a saving throw, it is pulled 3 meters towards you. The fact that you can also justify this as essentially Santa or Krampus dragging kids or people to their doom, and also essentially the inevitable fate of them to end up in their bag, in Krampus's bag, and then also in Krampus's grasp. That is actually pretty terrifying when you think about it. We'll also choose Dreadful Word, again doubling down on the hallucinogenics of Krampus, confuse a group of creatures, causing them to attack at random, wander around aimlessly, and occasionally skip turns in the stupor for a whopping 10 turns. This also will take up a Warlock spell slot, but it's definitely an option for spells for you to use. At level 8, the spell choice I would personally choose here would be Hunger of Hadar, dealing 2d6 cold damage and 2d6 acid damage. Creatures within this black sphere are blinded and take damage at the end of their turn and the start of their turn for a whopping 10 turns. Now this is very useful. The damage is okay, but specifically I like the status effect for the blinded feature, and also essentially just like the real life Krampus, causing and sowing as much confusion as possible. I also would personally choose the feat Meta Magic Adept, which is one of the modded feats I listed before in some of my previous videos as well. I would personally choose Meta Magic Subtle Spell, cast spells while silenced, and also Meta Magic Twin Spell. Spells that only target one creature can target an additional creature, and this applies to cantrips too. Essentially, you kind of dip your toes a tiny bit in the sorcery bloodline and skill tree with this. At level 9, for the spell choice here, I would pick Tomb of Delban, dealing 5 to 50 cold damage. Call forth an unimaginable cold and condense it around a target creature. If the target fails a Constitution saving throw, they take 5 to 50 cold damage and become entombed. With entombed, the creature is completely encased in ice and cannot act. While frozen, they have resistance to slashing, piercing, fire, and cold damage. At the start of their turns, they can make a strength saving throw to break free, but if they fail, they take 1 to 12 cold damage over time. Now, this is really powerful, honestly, at this level, and the fact that essentially we can trap our opponents and also deal damage to them over time. Plus, also for Eldritch Invocations, I would personally choose Conjure Elemental with Minions of Chaos, essentially giving you some extra allies on the battlefield, and yes, literally minions to continue your bidding and capturing people. At level 10, for the cantrip, you can choose whichever you want here. I decided to go with Mind Sliver, which deals 3 to 18 psychic damage, and possibly imposing a 1d4 penalty on an enemy's next saving throw. It's kind of justified with the fact that Krampus loves to play mind games and also just mess with the psychology and fear of their opponent. We also gain a subclass specific action of Vision of the Far Realm. Choose a target creature and grant them a glimpse into the madness of the Far Realm, inflicting inescapable madness. The creature becomes afflicted with cosmic madness for at least one turn. They can make a charisma saving throw at the end of each of their turns. If they succeed, they lose their action that turn. As for the spell here, I would personally choose Counterspell. This is essentially our anti-mage spell and gives us magical supremacy on the battlefield. At level 11, the spell choice I would gain here is Eye Bite. Eyes become black corridors walled with teeth. Your gaze capable of inflicting dread, sickness, or putting creatures to sleep for a whopping 10 turns. Very powerful area of control effect here, and also, especially with the sleep part too, it'll be something like saying that enemies are like so shocked of Krampus and that they essentially faint and pass out. The other spell I would choose here too is Banishment. Temporarily banish your target to another plane of existence. This is essentially like Krampus saying, "Get in my bag." At level 12, the spell choice I would personally choose here would be Hold Monster, paralyze a creature, can't move, act, or react. Attacks within 3 meters are always critical hits for 10 turns. No creature or being is powerful or bigger than possible for Krampus to capture and put in their bag. For Eldritch Invocations, you can choose whichever you want here. I personally like Mire of the Mind, slowing targets up to 6 creatures, and movement and actions are affected. AC and Dex saves are also reduced by 2 for 10 turns. The feat, you can also choose whichever you want here. I'm deciding to go with Telekinetic, learn to move things with your mind, increase chosen ability score by 1 to a max of 20. You can cast Invisible Mage Hand without verbal or somatic component, and you can push and pull a creature telekinetically using the chosen ability score as the spell DC. Alright friends, this is gonna sound like a total cop-out for those who have seen my Buff Santa build video, but we're essentially gonna use similar if not the same gear and equipment. Weapon is gonna be different since we are gonna go more of a caster base, but this is arguably one of my favorite legendary modded sets of equipment for Baldurs Gate 3, and it worked well with the Santa build. It'll work well with the Krampus build because, like I said, Krampus is essentially just evil Santa, but I'll be going through the descriptions for all of the viewers who have not seen the Buff Santa build. Starting off with the Frigid Adept hat. Frigid Advantage grants you advantage on attack rolls against chilled creatures. We also gain the Wall of Ice evocation spell, 20 to 120 damage. Raise a wall of solid ice that deals 10 to 60 cold damage to anyone standing in its way, and also gaining a bonus +2 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. Cloak of the Frigid Adept, Frigid Retaliation. When a creature deals damage to the wearer, that creature deals 3 to 12 that creature takes 3 to 12 cold damage and creates a surface of ice beneath you. Adroit Caster. Cantrips targeting foes and allies can target an additional creature. The same target can be chosen twice, and we also gain the Ice Storm evocation spell, 10 to 60 cold damage. Storm of Hail and Ice crashes from the sky, covering the ground and striking all objects and creatures within range for 2 turns. We also have the main armor piece here, Frigid Adept Robe. Frigid Mastery. When the wearer deals cold damage, it deals an additional 6 cold damage. Magical Armor. The AC of this armor is based on your armor proficiency and dex. If you have a medium armor proficiency, you gain extra +2 AC. AC increases at levels 4, 7, and 10. We also gain Armor of Virgal, 30 temporary hit points and deal 30 cold damage to any creature that hits you with a melee attack. Frigid Adept Gloves. Frigid Strikes. When you deal cold damage, the target needs to succeed a Constitution saving throw or become chilled for 3 turns. Quick spells of Flinger. Cantrips that cost an action cost a bonus action instead. Effect can be used once per short rest. We also gain Cone of Cold, 9 to 72 damage. Make a flurry of frosts. Crisp air and condensed snow crystals erupt from your hands. Frigid Adept Boots. Frigid Acuity. When you deal cold damage, you gain Frigid Acuity for 2 turns, but the main feature here I like is Icy Step. Essentially, you teleport to an area, dealing 3 to 12 cold damage, and also causing a scene too. The Impact Blast spreads in a 3-meter zone. As for the amulets and rings, Frigid Adept Amulet, when you deal cold damage, heal yourself for 3d4 hit points. We also have the Frigid Missile, which is essentially frozen magic missile. Always hits its targets too, even though it's a meager 2d5 cold damage. Ring of Frigid Explosions. When you deal cold damage, create an explosion of an icy surface at the target. Ring of Frigid Adept. Ignore resistance and immunity to cold damage. In addition, you deal cold damage and cannot roll a 1. Frigid Bolt also deals 3 to 30 damage. Pretty whopping for a simple cantrip as well. We'll also be using the Frigid Adept stuff for our main hand weapon. Versatile. Frigid Cold buildup. When creatures are hit with the cold damage while already chilled, target needs to succeed on a Constitution saving throw or become frozen for 2 turns. Magical Cold Weapon. This magical cold weapon grows more powerful as the wielder gains experience. We also gain Arcane Battery. Alleviate the arcane burden of spellcasting with the power of the staff. Next spell slot you cast doesn't cost a spell slot. We also gain Frigid Ray, which deals 2 to 12 damage, 8 rays of cold, each ray dealing 2 to 12 cold damage. Alright everyone, that has been my Krampus build for the holidays. Let me know if you would agree or disagree on my choice of weapons, spells, overall equipment, or leveling features too. And also, what differences you would choose in terms of building this character as well. Whether it's for min-maxing damage output and leaning into that cold damage, or also with role-playing as well. I always love hearing about different types of lore and history of characters, especially when it comes to D&D. And also, for all the new and returning viewers, if you've watched this far into the video, thank you so much as always for giving me the time of day. And also, let me know in the comments what kinds of characters you would love to see me build on this channel too, whether it's in Baldur's Gate or eventually with Elder Scrolls and modded Skyrim too. And also, when it comes to future content, if you want to see more character builds like this, Elder Scrolls and Skyrim lore videos in the future, and also some Warhammer narrative campaigns, I'd love to have you join us on those adventures, friends. But until then, happy holidays, stay safe, and I'll save you a seat at the table for the next adventure.